The breaking news, stay at home. That is the order tonight from 4 state governors as the coronavirus pandemic spreads. New York, California, Illinois, and Connecticut all ordering non-essential employees to stay home. Those orders cover 75 million people across the United States.
In February 2020, the Trump administration declared a public health emergency due to the coronavirus outbreak. This came just 1 month after the World Health Organization first announced the existence of this brand new virus. The following events that took place over the next 2 years are still at the forefront of the public consciousness. Sickness and disease, mass unemployment and government lockdowns, Netflix Tiger King binges, and Zoom social events all remain fresh in our minds. Many have speculated the governments have gone too far, and perhaps the cure was worse than the problem. Even today, as I write this in July 2022, parts of China remain in lockdown. But in this video, we won't be focused on the medicine or authoritarian policies. We will be investigating the largest fraud in modern history, with over $100 billion in fraudulent riches. On March 29, 2020, nearly 2 weeks after the first wave of government lockdowns spread across the US, the CARES Act was signed into law. It provided more than $2 trillion in economic relief to help Americans deal with the economic impact of the global pandemic. The act originally authorized almost $350 billion in forgivable loans to small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program, also called PPP loans, and later, Congress would authorize an additional $321 billion of PPP funding. The Paycheck Protection Program allowed small businesses to apply for low-interest private loans to pay for payroll and other expenses. These loans were typically approved for 2.5 times the applicant's average monthly payroll costs. The key advantage of the program was the loan may be partially or fully forgiven if the business did not lay off or reduce employee wages. On the surface, this may seem like a harmless act of charity by the United States government after forcing so many to put their businesses on hold, but the devil's in the details. The Small Business Administration, the agency in charge of allocating this money, was solely focused on speed and ease of access. The program authorized banks and other financial institutions to make government-backed loans to businesses, but they made access to the funds far too easy. But what didn't happen after was even the most basic of checks to verify that the money was getting to the people that deserved the funding. And wherever there's easy money to be made, grifters and con men can be found. Experts say millions of borrowers inflated the number of employees or created companies out of thin air to collect large PPP loans. They intentionally misclassified independent contractors as employees to increase their headcount and boosted employees' salaries in their applications. For much of 2020, lenders did little to verify the applications because Congress required the SBA to issue explicit guidance that stated, lenders will not be held liable for borrowers' failure to comply with program criteria. In essence, they gave these financial institutions that were issuing these loans the cover to not verify the borrower's credentials. The government spent approximately $800 billion and provided 21 million loans to individuals, many of whom participated in what prosecutors are calling the largest fraud in U.S. history. The theft of hundreds of billions of dollars in taxpayer money intended to help those who were harmed by the coronavirus pandemic. The fraudsters couldn't resist purchasing luxury cars, mansions, and going on lavish vacations. Many of these fraudsters exposed themselves by posting their extravagant purchases on social media. The number of stories is endless. A Florida man admitted to a scheme that yielded him $3.9 million, according to his guilty plea. The man's purchases with the fraudulent loans included a $300,000 Lamborghini, thousands of dollars at luxury hotels, jewelry, clothing, and dating sites. Another example in Miami, Florida, involved a man and a woman who admitted to a complex scheme where they claimed to be operating farms with many employees out of small, single-family homes in the middle of the city. If there had been any verification in place, this scheme would have been flagged immediately. Even mildly famous celebrities participated in the fraud. Rapper and former reality TV star Mo Fain was sentenced to over 17 years in prison and given a $4.4 million restitution bill for his part in a pandemic loan scheme. Even a former NFL player, Josh Bellamy, was sentenced to 3 years and 1 month in federal prison for illegally obtaining over $1.2 million in relief funds. Haywood Talcove, the CEO of LexisNexis Risk Solutions, a company that maintains large databases of public records and sells verification services to governments, says the government, the lenders, and banks could have and should have prevented such widespread fraud. When COVID relief was proposed, Talkov said he spoke to Larry Kudlow, the top economic advisor to President Donald Trump at the time, and told him this was going to be the biggest fraud in the history of our country. And in response, he was told, you can have speed or you can have security, but not both. And at this time, the government would rather just get the money out. This theft of $100 billion amounts to approximately 12% of all PPP funding. That's on top of the estimated $90 to $400 billion believed to have been stolen from the $900 billion COVID unemployment relief program, at least half of which is thought to be stolen by international fraudsters, according to NBC News. The Biden administration imposed new verification rules that administration officials say appear to have made a difference in curbing fraud, but they acknowledge that programs in 2020 needlessly sacrificed security for speed. Normally, the SBA's Office of the Inspector General, the department of the SBA, tasked with investigating potential crimes, used to receive between 700 and 800 hotline complaints a year. But in the years since the CARES Act became law, it has received nearly 150,000 hotline complaints of fraud, amounting to 195 times as many in previous years. To find more cases, the Pandemic Response Accountability Committee is employing data scientists who use artificial intelligence to sift through the hundreds of millions of records, searching for fraudulent patterns. In one successful case, it was found that a phone number for a gas station in Houston was used on 150 different loan applications. With so many instances of fraud, the strain on law enforcement resources has been enormous. Agents from multiple federal law enforcement agencies say this could take decades to unravel all of the fraudulent activities. Many in government have been disappointed on how fast many of these cases are moving. But these are not simple or easy cases to investigate and charge. They often involve obtaining and piecing together complex financial data and tax records for individuals and companies. As of March 2021, the Department of Justice has publicly charged 474 defendants with criminal offenses based on fraud schemes attempting to obtain over $569 million from the U.S. government and unknowing individuals. The Secret Service has said they currently have 900 active criminal investigations into pandemic fraud, and 100 people have been arrested so far. All this to say, many more will end up getting away with it. There are many potential cases the Justice Department has considered not prosecuting. The department is expected to decline prosecution of cases involving small dollar amounts, likely under $10,000. Early in 2021, the Federal Reserve stated that about 3 in 10 small businesses claim that there is no way they could survive the pandemic without obtaining additional funding from the federal government. When the PPP ran out of funding during the early weeks of May, it left countless business owners stranded. Many employers were forced to lay off their remaining employees, the exact issue that the PPP was meant to prevent. Being that anywhere from 10 to 18% of all PPP loans were potentially fraudulent, preventing this fraud from occurring could have helped many more small businesses survive the pandemic.